Okay, Chloe Bellerby, you're 13. If you'd like to start your verbal response.
Yeah, I've just watched centre mid perform. I'll now assess his performance. So the first strength I identified was his heading. This was a strength because he made perfect contact with the ball in the centre of his forehead, using explosive power on his legs to leap off the floor. This meant that his goal went in the bottom right hand corner, giving the keeper little time to react. The second strength I identified was the player's first touch. On the several times that I've seen him receive the ball, he's managed to control the ball fully with both feet. This meant he could get his pass off first time, and it gave the opposition team little time to intercept. And the third strength I identified was the player's position on the pitch. This was shown when the player won the ball on the 18-yard box. Although he lost it, he managed to get himself back into a position where he was able to put the striker under pressure, meaning he made mistakes and he lost the ball. Moving on to the weaknesses, the first weakness I identified was his shooting. This was a weakness because he often toe-punted the ball and he showed no real understanding of placement in the goal. This meant that the 5 attempts he had on goal, only one of them actually challenged the keeper and the others went wide. The second weakness I identified was the player's dribbling. He showed no real understanding of keeping the ball close to him when dribbling with the ball. This was shown on the halfway line when he tried to beat the opposing centre mid. The opposing centre mid immediately won the ball and this meant that he could counter-attack and score. The third weakness I identified was the player's short passing. This was a weakness as he often looked unbalanced, and this meant he made no real contact with the ball. This meant that the opposition team were able to intercept each time and make a tackle. Now looking at the tactics, the first strength I identified was role changing. This was shown when the centre-back dribbled forward with the ball. Playing as a centre mid, he dropped off into the back three in order to ensure there was no gap in the defence. The second strength I identified was the diagonal ball from the right back to the left mid. This was a strength because it opened the play up, it stretched the defence, and it also meant that the other team were often out of position, meaning that they had to go on goal. The third strength I identified was the player's ability to observe spatial awareness. So, for example, he showed he knew exactly where his teammates were automatically, which could suggest that he's at the autonomous stage of learning for this particular skill. This was shown when he received the ball, he automatically passed it on to the right wing for the right winger to run onto. This meant that the right winger could get across into the box and the striker could have a go on goal. Moving on to the weaknesses, the first weakness I identified was the long pass to switch play. So the tactic was for the left winger to switch play to the right wing. The right winger, however, this was the wrong tactic as the right winger was unable to control the ball comfortably, often meaning that the ball went away from him and the opposition team gained possession of the ball. The second weakness I identified was the formation. This was a weakness because they were playing three at the back against a very attacking side. The defence played very deep, which meant the striker was very rarely called offside. This meant that the goalkeeper was constantly under pressure from the striker. Third weakness identified was the attacking play. The tactic was for the centre mid to pass the ball forward for a long ball over the defence. This was the wrong tactic, however, as the striker wasn't skillful enough or fast enough to reach the ball, meaning that the goalkeeper obtained possession of the ball each time. Looking at the fitness aspect, so the first strength I identified was his speed. Speed is the ability to cover a set distance in the fastest time possible. This was a strength because he managed to reach every single loose ball before the opposition. As well as this, he showed he could beat a player on the wing to get a cross into the box, meaning that the striker was able to score. If this change of pace didn't occur, then he would have had to make another option. And the second strength I identified was the cardiovascular fitness. This was a strength because he managed to play a full 90 minutes without fatiguing due to lactic acid. This meant that he could maintain a full game without being subbed off due to poor performance. The third strength I identified was his power. Power is the ability to exert maximum muscular contraction in a short burst of movement. This was his strength because he managed to use explosive power in his legs to leap off the floor and defensively head the ball away. This meant the opposition team didn't get the first touch to it, which meant he could have probably scored. Looking at the weaknesses, so the first weakness I identified was the player's coordination. Coordination is the ability to use 2 or more body parts at the same time. This was shown when the goalkeeper took a goal kick. The player failed to control the ball using his feet, his arms for balance and his eyes. This meant the ball went away from him and he lost the ball in a very dangerous position. The second weakness I identified was his balance. Balance is the ability to remain upright and stable and under control of the body at all times. The player changed direction, his centre of mass changed and he fell over the ball. This meant the opposition team gained possession straight away. The third weakness I identified was the player's agility. Agility is the ability to change direction quickly and under control. This was a weakness as he often failed to change direction to lose a player. This meant he was constantly man-marked and he failed to make any runs forward with the ball. Overall, I would say that his performance was average, as he made some good points in the performance, however made some bad errors. Having established his major weakness is long passing. This is because his success rate was often very poor. On the 10 times that he's attempted it, only one of them was actually effective in the game. Short passing may have been more effective for this particular time. As well as this, his technique was completely wrong in that he toe punted the ball in order to create a lift. Comparing him to the perfect model of Farrell Williams, in the preparation phase, Farrell would approach the ball at a 30-degree angle. She'd plant her non-kicking foot next to the ball, and she'd hold her arms out for balance. In the execution stage, she'd keep her eyes on the ball at all times. She'd use her laces to kick the ball, and again she'd use her arms for balance. The third, in terms of the recovery stage, Farrell would then follow through with the ball. This would determine the powerfulness of the pass, and then she'd plant her kicking foot on the floor in order to regain balance. Having established his long passing as his weakness, I've come up with a 2 to 3 month action plan, as I think this is the most effective time to improve his long passing ability. This will be split up into 6 blocks of 2 weeks. So every single block will start with a 10-minute warm-up. In terms of the pre-test, it will include the player stand on the 18-yard box. The pitch will be split up into 3 different coloured areas, the red, the green and the blue. The coach will say which area he wants the ball to be kicked into. The player will have 10 attempts on 3 different types of passing. The 3 types of passing will be long pass, standard long pass, curling long pass and outside of the foot long pass. So in block 1, I've applied the FIT principle to each of the blocks to ensure that the sessions are progressive. In the first session, the frequency of the block will be once each week. The time will be 30 minutes long and the intensity will be low to moderate. In this one, he'll practice the basic technique, comparing himself to the perfect model each time. The distance will be from one side of the pitch to the other. He'll ensure that he'll approach the ball at a 30-degree angle, and he'll plant his non-kicking foot next to the ball in order to ensure that the technique is right. Progressing onto block 2, it will be progress in terms of time, as it will be 35 minutes long this time. It will be a bit more intense than the last session. Again, he'll practice basic technique, however at this time a target area will be introduced. The target area the ball must reach the target area each time. The first touch must be taken in the target area and the second touch must be away. Again, he must compare himself to the perfect model, keeping his eyes on the ball at all time and ensuring that his follow through is powerful enough to reach the target area. Moving on to block 3. So block 3 will now progress to 40 minutes. The intensity will be much higher. It will progress in terms of this time a cone will be put into each target area. Again, the first touch should be taken around the cone and the second touch would be the long pass. This time a point system applies, so if the ball doesn't reach the target area, then the other person gets a point. Also, if the first touch isn't taken around the call, the same thing applies. Again, you should concentrate on approaching the ball at a 30-degree angle, using both feet to progress his technique further. Moving on to block 4, so this will be a longer session, it will be twice a week, and the intensity will be moderate to high this time. This will include a back 3 and the performer playing as a centre mid. His main role is to ensure that he gets as many long passes over the back 3 for the striker to run onto, using his newly found technique. This will also occur from all different areas on the pitch, so he'll have no ideal circumstances for his particular pass. The goal of this is to create as many successful long passes as possible in the right decision. Moving on to block 5, so those sessions will now be 50 minutes long. However, this time it'll be twice a week and the intensity will be high. They'll be split up into 2 teams. Each team will have their own area. Two players from each team will go into the other area, and the aim of the game is to complete 10 successful passes without an interception. I've set my performer's own individual target of creating as many long passes as possible within the game, ensuring that it's at the right time and the right decision for that particular moment. Moving on to block 6, so block 6 is the final week. This will consist of a 90-minute condition game. The condition of the game will be any goal scored must come from a long pass. If it isn't, then the goal will be disqualified. Again, I've set my performer's own individual target of completing as many long passes as he can at the right time at different positions on the pitch. Having finished the 6-block period, he will now repeat his pre-test. This will be the same in the post-test. This will allow me to compare whether it's been successful in his long passing and whether it was the right time period for this particular movement. So I'll now look at the A&P. In terms of A&P, the biomechanics of it, so for a long pass, the stability and the centre of mass are essential. Centre of mass is the point at which the body is balanced in all directions. This was essential in ensuring my player could retain a long pass and ultimately ensure that he managed to gain balance again each time. As well as this, lever systems are very important. Lever systems are the coordination of bones and muscles. A long pass is a 3rd-class lever system, so it means that the effort is in the middle and the loading fulcrum are on either side. So in terms of reducing obesity, if my player continues to play football regularly, he's likely to reduce the chances of gaining weight due to burning energy. As well as this, he'll reduce the chance of coronary heart disease. It'll also reduce the chance of LDL cholesterol build-up, which is a bad type of cholesterol. This sort of cholesterol deposits in the artery walls and can often lead to blood clots and further health problems. In terms of the muscles used, so the main muscles used are in the legs. The main muscles used are the quadriceps, the hamstring, the gastrocnemius and the soleus. There are 4 types of muscular contraction, so the isotonic contraction, the isometric, the eccentric and the concentric. In terms of a long pass, the main movement is the isotonic muscular contraction. As well as this, there are 2 types of muscle fibres, so there's fast twitch muscle fibres and slow twitch muscle fibres. Fast twitch muscle fibres are best suited to marathon runners as they allow the most sort of energy, and also it's used for aerobic performances. Fast twitch muscle fibres are best suited to sprinters due to the anaerobic threshold, and the muscle fibres only tend to work for this amount of time. As well as this, I think that my performer has type 2B, which is a mixture of both. As he showed that he can sprint to a loose ball using his slow twitch muscle fibres, however plays a full 90 minutes using his fast twitch muscle fibres. So moving on to the bones used. So bones used all over the body, but particularly in a long pass, the femur, the tibia, the fibula, in the arms as well. So the humerus and carpals are all used in order to ensure that long pass is successful. Moving on to the energy systems. So there are 3 types of energy systems: the ATPP system, the glycolytic, and the aerobic system. ATP is the energy source used for this. So in terms of my performer, the main 2 systems he uses the ATPP system and the aerobic system. The ATPP system only has 1 ATP. It actually only works for up to 10 seconds, so this may be the short burst of movement to a loose ball. But the main energy source comes from the aerobic system. This has a 38 ATP yield. The energy source from that tends to come from glycogen, and it works for over 160 seconds, which means it's quite suitable for game sports such as football. So in terms of the joints, so the main joint my performer used in his long pass is the lever system. The lever system basically includes a bone articulating a trough-shaped bone, which is held onto by ligaments, which limits sideways movement. It also means that it's restricted to one plane of movement. That concludes my A&P section. I'll now move on to the skill acquisition and psychology. So in terms of skill acquisition, skill continua consists of my skill was a long passing, so it's an open skill. It was a windy day, so the wind often had an effect on the accuracy of the long pass. It's an externally paced skill, as the opposition are constantly putting my player under pressure. As well as this, it's a gross motor skill. It's a large movement, so it uses the large muscles in the body. And finally, it's a difficult skill due to the many subroutines in this particular performance. So moving on to arousal, there are 3 types of arousal theories. The first is the catastrophe theory. This suggests that once the optimum arousal level is reached, it rapidly decreases and performance either deteriorates or it goes back around to improve performance. The second arousal theory is the drive theory. This states that as arousal increases, so does performance. And the third theory is the inverted G theory. This states that when you reach your optimal arousal, this is when you best perform. If you're too over or under aroused, then you don't perform to the best of your ability. I think this is best suited to my performer, as he's shown signs of being too over aroused, meaning he's made mistakes that he probably wouldn't usually make. So looking at social inhibition and social facilitation. So social facilitation is suited to an extrovert personality that tend to perform best in front of a crowd of people. They're quite confident. Moving on to social inhibition, this is the opposite of this, so they tend to be quite shy, introvert characters, and might actually don't perform as well in front of a crowd of people. Having watched my performer, I would say that social inhibition is best suited to my performer. This is because he's shown signs of struggling to perform in front of a crowd of people. He's made mistakes that he probably wouldn't usually make if he wasn't in front of a crowd of people. Looking at anxiety, so anxiety is a state of apprehension, worry or uneasiness. There are 2 types of anxiety, so there's state anxiety and trait theory anxiety. State anxiety is a temporary form of anxiety. It usually occurs before a big game or a big event. And trait theory anxiety, this is a more permanent type of anxiety, and it's often said to be part of a person's personality. There are 2 types of responses to anxiety, so there's the cognitive response, which comes from the brain, and the somatic response, which is the physical response to anxiety. Having watched my performer, I would say that state anxiety best suits his personality, as he has shown that he was quite nervous before the big game. However, he has now settled into the game and is playing to the best of his ability. In terms of state anxiety, there are 2 personality types, type A and B. I would say that my performer is a type B personality. Moving on to the moving on to the memory models. So there are two types of memory models. The first memory model is the multi-store memory model. This comes from many inputs such as your senses, so visually seeing the ball come towards you, the speed of the ball coming towards you, people around you, birds in the sky, the ground, all of this comes into the sensory memory. As well as this auditory, so again the sound of the ball, the sound of a pass coming towards you, people on the sideline speaking, your coach shouting instructions, all of that goes into there as well. And the kinesthesis of the ball as well, so the feel of the ball essentially. This all goes into the working memory, which then goes into the short-term memory. The short-term memory can hold 5 to 9 pieces of information at any one time. For example, this may be the speed of the ball coming towards you. The short-term memory through rehearsal then can go into the long-term memory. For example, successful performances are often rehearsed, and this goes into the long-term memory. Is, for example, the movement of passing a ball. This can be retrieved from the long-term memory back into the short-term memory, so the skill is done autonomously without thinking. The second type is the deep and shallow processing. So shallow processing comes from the short-term memory. It's also come from the senses as well. This, in sense, means that it isn't remembered completely. It's only remembered for a short period of time. In terms of deep processing, this comes from a stimulus which resorts to the previous stimulus. Through practice and rehearsal, this can go into a strong memory trace. Moving on to the socio-cultural factors. So the first socio-cultural factor is the popular recreation. In terms of this, it was often associated with the lower class in pre-industrial Britain. Football was originally known as mob football. It was played locally due to the limited transport. It was played occasionally on holy days such as Ash Wednesday and Shrove Tuesday. As well as this, it had limited codification due to literacy levels. In terms of governing bodies, so before any governing bodies came about, games were often very cruel and violent. This was a reflection of society at the time. A governing body for football is the FA. The FA increases participation levels across the country. As well as this, they have introduced integrity into the game to ensure that rules are made mandatory and everyone plays the same sort of game. As well as this, in terms of local to national leagues, so in the 21st century, Dr. Thomas Arnold brought in inter-house games. These inter-house games led to inter-school games, which is competitive play against rivalry schools. This in turn led to local leagues, which meant that local people could join their own team. And through the introduction of transport, this led to national leagues. So moving on to transport, before the 21st century, people often used transport was only walking and horseback riding. However, when the train lines were introduced, this increased participation levels in sport, as it meant players could travel to and from fixtures. It also meant that spectators could travel to and from watching their teams play. Moving on to rational recreation, so ex-public school boys from Cambridge and Oxford introduced governing bodies. This meant that there was purpose-built facilities. Mob football turned into association football with written rules, and the games were much less cruel and violent. And finally, rational And finally, public schools. So in stage 2 was Dr. Thomas Arnold. He introduced social control within schools. It was a major part of the PE curriculum as he introduced it into the PE curriculum. This meant that schools had to participate in sport every afternoon. This was a pivotal part in the development of sport and meant that more and more people got involved in sport. As well as this, he introduced it into a house and into school sporting system. Again, a pivotal part in the development of sport. That concludes my analysis of performance.